Dana White just made a bet that could either make UFC the most valuable sports property in the world or fundamentally change how we think about sports media forever. And nobody, not ESPN, not Netflix, not even the fighters themselves, saw this coming. I've been witnessing and around the fight business side of the combat sports for years, from when we had Karate Combat on CBS to watching every major streaming deal reshape the industry. What happened with the UFC deal isn't just about them, the UFC. It's about the entire industry, the complete destruction of a business model that's made millions. Here's what everybody missed. While we were all watching Netflix pay Jake Paul and Mike Tyson ridiculous money, and Amazon throw billions at Thursday Night Football, the real war was happening behind closed doors. Because UFC just signed a 7-year, $7.7 billion deal that eliminates pay-per-view forever. More than 5 times their original Fox deal. Here's the twist nobody's really talking about. They just killed their own golden goose, and the fallout is going to be massive. Let me take you back to 2001 when the UFC was dying. The Fertitta brothers bought it for $2 million, less than what some fighters make for a single fight today. Dana White was a boxing manager from Boston who'd never run a major sports organization. They had one advantage though, pay-per-view. While other sports were tied to traditional broadcast models, the UFC could charge premium prices for premium content. $39.95 became $49.95, then $59.95, and eventually hitting $79.99. They made scarcity work for them. By 2023, major UFC pay-per-views were generating 50 to 70 million per event. Multiply that with 12, 13 events per year, add in the ESPN Plus deal, and you're looking at a money machine that seemed unstoppable. But little did Dana White know, the very model that saved UFC was about to become its biggest liability. Because while the UFC was perfecting the pay-per-view model, the entire media landscape was shifting beneath their feet. Netflix cracked the code with Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, 60 million households watching simultaneously. Not 1 million buying a pay-per-view, 60 million. Amazon proved that live sports drive subscribers with Thursday Night Football. Apple started cherry-picking premium content. And there is the guy, Turki Al-Sheikh. The Saudi power broker started throwing around phrases like death of pay-per-view and making boxing accessible. His DAZN partnership was positioning to eliminate the paywall entirely. Dana White was facing a choice: evolve or become irrelevant. The decision he made, nobody saw it coming. A few weeks ago, Monday morning, Dana White drops this bombshell. 7 years, $7.7 billion, Paramount Plus. Every UFC event, including the big numbered shows that used to cost $80, now with a basic streaming subscription. But here's where the story gets really interesting. This wasn't just about the money. Of course, that's a huge factor. But this was also about Dana White making a bet that accessibility and eyeballs beats exclusivity. Let me put this into perspective. The original Fox deal, 700 million over 7 years. And then ESPN, about 1.5 billion over 5 years. And Paramount just slid in and offered 7.7 billion over 7 years. It's not just an increase, that's a complete market reset. But here's what Ariel Helwani and other insiders immediately started asking. What about the fighters? UFC champions like Conor McGregor, John Jones, Israel Adesanya, they weren't just making millions from their base salaries or their show money, but they were getting pay-per-view points. Think about it this way. If a pay-per-view does 1 million buys at $80 each, that's 80 million in revenue. Top champions get anywhere from like $1 to $5 per buy. That's potentially $5 million extra per fight. Francis Ngannou made more from pay-per-view points than his base purse from the fights. With no more pay-per-view, those points become worthless. Sure, UFC is making more money overall, but there's no guarantee fighters see any of it. we could be looking at a mass exodus of top talent if they don't restructure contracts fairly. And to be honest, I don't think that's gonna happen. They're gonna raise fighter pay and they're gonna make the fighters right. And that's not even the most shocking part of this story. UFC just made a strategic pivot away from their own streaming service. They've been building Fight Pass since 2013 as their direct-to-consumer platform. Fans pay $9.99 monthly for fight nights, international events, early prelims, and the extensive fight library. Everything moving to Paramount Plus, they'll need to completely reimagine what Fight Pass offers. Interestingly, when they did UFC BJJ, they didn't just put it on Fight Pass, but they were streaming it on YouTube. DAZN just lost their biggest potential acquisition. ESPN Plus loses their main content driver in 2026. Netflix and Amazon are scrambling for combat sports content. One deal just reshaped the entire streaming landscape. And here's the real genius move. Paramount didn't just buy UFC content. They bought the blueprint for killing pay-per-view in sports entertainment. Other promotions are going to have to follow or figure it out on their own, but they might just die. So what can we learn from Dana White's $7.7 billion gamble? Which I don't think was a gamble. But sometimes the biggest risk is playing it safe. UFC could have stuck with the ESPN, kept charging $80 per event, and slowly watched their audience shrink as younger audience and younger fans move to streaming first entertainment. But instead, they blew up their own business model for exponential scale. They chose volume over premium pricing. Somebody pays at the end, but now it's not the fans, but now it's Paramount who is paying for it. And if they are right, and I think they are, they just secured UFC's place as essential content in the streaming wars for the next decade. Look, stories like this, the behind-the-scenes business moves that reshape entire industries, this is exactly what I cover in my newsletter, so sign up if you're interested. If you want to understand the real business moves happening in combat sports and streaming before they hit mainstream media, the link is in the description. Plus, I've got an exclusive breakdown of what this means for boxing and other combat sports that I'm only sharing with subscribers. Smash that subscribe button and the like button. The streaming wars are just getting started, and the next big move could come from anywhere. If you want to see how UFC became a money printing machine in the first place, check out my deep dive on how the UFC is printing money. It's the perfect companion to understanding why this Paramount deal was inevitable.